You see, Fred, it's the connection between the quality of care that children get when they're small and the problems that show up later in their lives. That's the thing. That's what young people aren't aware of before they have kids. If only young parents knew the kind of trouble that can result from neglecting their infants' emotional needs, then they'd rearrange their priorities. They'd put their baby's needs first, at least during pregnancy, at birth, and the first 3 years. The tragic thing is, by the time the child is grown into adulthood and you see the problems, it's too late to do much about it. I've seen too many of those kids, and it hurts.
His name is Elliot Barker. He's a psychiatrist. He works at the Mental Health Center in Penetanguishene, Ontario, in the Maximum Security Division. That part of the Mental Health Center is said to house the 300 most dangerous people in the province of Ontario. Elliot Barker has spent 16 years dealing with psychopaths and schizophrenics and other criminally insane persons. People who have committed some of the most heinous acts of our time. He has been described in the press as the psychiatrist who calls at least 100 murderers by their first names. Elliot Barker is internationally known for developing one of the most intensive treatment programs in the world for the criminally insane. And he asks himself, why are these people the way they are?
In my experience, certainly clinically with severe psychopaths, is that where they've had a chaotic upbringing early on, before the age of 3, some of it put it at a period of 6 months to 18 months. If they don't get the attachment formed then they don't have the capacity for empathy and the capacity for trust and the capacity for affection later on.
But how did you come to the realization? Was there an incident in your career that suddenly made this relationship seem apparent?
I was aware of what it was saying in the literature about this, but you know, I think you don't get motivated to do things until something touches you right in your guts. And I was enjoying the work at the hospital and developing programs for patients there. I got drawn into court work increasingly, having to appear at trials to testify about the fellow, about his mental state at the time of the killing. And there was a trial back in the early 1970s. It was a young fellow who came to the hospital. He was charged with the murder of 3 children. It was one of the most gruesome murders that I'd been involved with. He had taken 3 children, ages 1, 2, and 3, and he had swung them by the feet and bashed their heads off the walls of this tiny shack and off the steel bed, and killed them, and then sexually assaulted them. Well, you read that in the paper and so on, and it upsets you, and it makes you feel very, I don't know what. But you don't expect to find the perpetrator of the crime to be, how shall I say, like anyone else. I mean, he doesn't have horns on his head. And I got to know him fairly well in 60 days of examining him at the hospital. I had to go to the trial, and it was in a small town and a long ways away. And there were 2 things that got to me. One was the color photographs of the victims. Somehow, a color photograph is, I think, almost worse than being there. And the other was that I was in my hotel room, and the trial went on for something like 9 days. And I really got to ruminating. The tragedy of the kids being killed, the tragedy of the perpetrator of the offense, his life was finished. What goes on that this kind of thing happens? It just got eating at me. And I think I came at this problem of psychopathy and this problem of the neglect that's almost endemic in our society, the low priority that the care of children has. And I really began to ask myself, God, why spend your life trying to cure these breakdown products? Can't something more be done to raise public awareness about the importance of it way back then, when nobody seems to...
Well, is it preventable? Is there something that can be done?
I think it is. I think if you... See, if a couple are going to have a child and they plan ahead to have it, they plan before the conception that they're going to try to provide the best they can for that child. Not that their life is going to march on and they're going to have all the goodies they're used to having and the kid will be there and somehow it'll get looked after. Not that the kid will come sort of unprepared or unthought of, but they plan to have a human being, to unite to do that. And they plan to alter their lives early on so that they can provide the best care possible. Well, when that happens, they arrange for a kind of a support system, a spouse that's going to care and assist, not just dump it to the woman as her job and be off earning a paycheck, but for the father to be involved in a real way as a backup to the mother, so that they have the energy to do the tremendous amount of work that a young child requires.
When we talk about the child rearing process, what is it that we're trying to do by bringing up those kids? Is that a question that we have to ask ourselves at the outset when we're preparing for parenthood? And in your experience, what is it that we as parents should be trying to accomplish?
Well, I think you don't hear this. I don't hear this discussion. I really, certainly not amongst my friends, but it seems to me reasonable to say, for us to say as adults, what kind of people do we want? I mean, what kind of people do we want to be, or do we wish we were? I mean, what things do we value? You know, what happens is that we want to be better and bigger consumers. We want to wear flashier clothes and drink more expensive wine, or be somehow better than the neighbor and stuff like that. But that's not what matters to you, I'm sure. It certainly isn't what matters to me. What matters to me is, I come back to the same things. Who can I trust? Who can trust me? Can I exist in an affectionate relationship with people? Can I be sensitive to other people's needs? When I strip it all away, I think that's where people live, but we don't act as though that's where we're at, and we certainly don't raise children so that those qualities come to the fore.
You've used those terms, the terms trust, and I think you used the word empathy, and you just used the word affection. Are those qualities that mean the same thing to all of us when we're raising children? How do we establish those values? What do those words mean to you?
Well, it's embarrassing because I've been thinking and talking about those words for quite some time. I finally looked them up. I wrote them down. I can't remember a good definition of them. In fact, I went to the dictionary. To look up, just what I was trying to think. One of the things that really locked me onto this was a patient that I had that was very, very upset and disturbed, and we came to him to give him a needle, to settle him down. He was in a strip room in a hospital. And he looked at me when we came to him and he says, Dr. Barker, I can't get along with myself, and I can't get along with other people. He put it so poignantly, I mean, sort of the tragedy of it, and it stuck with me because I think, in a way, it's the problem that all of us have. And I then got talking about these qualities of trust and empathy and affection. Well, empathy has a very special meaning to me, and I talked about that. And I looked it up, trust, and it says a confident reliance on the integrity and honesty of another person. Well, boy, how many people in your day-to-day transactions can you apply that to? That you have a confident reliance on their integrity and honesty. Well, I thought about that for myself. Somehow, I can't remember that definition sort of easily, but it struck me that in my day-to-day working, and you go into a store and you buy things and the people you meet, I mean, this quality of trust is not exactly oozing out of every pore of our social fabric. Affection is another, a sort of namby-pamby word that so I looked it up. I didn't think I'd, hit anything. They talk about a fond attachment or a kind feeling. Well, there's something to that. How many people can you say that your relationship with them is a fond attachment? That's all, a fond attachment or a kind feeling. Well, I think if we could sort of, as people say, stop the world and get off and look at it and say, what do we want? What are we on about? We would come back to those qualities.